Hello, and welcome to Living History with Ted Goldsboro, and today's guest, Jerry Francis, president of the Lower Merion Historical Society. We're going to be talking about the revitalization of the Pennsylvania Railroad, former Pennsylvania Railroad, Cynwyd Station. Welcome, Jerry. Thanks for joining us today.
I've been waiting 6 years for this interview. We took on a project back in 2007. It's taken us 6 years to complete it. And this show is to really talk about the before, during, and after the revitalization of the Cynwyd Station.
So, great. I like to think of it as kind of the station is like a phoenix arising from the ashes, because when our viewing audience sees all that we went through in the renovation of the train station, they'll understand that term. Right. So we start with an early picture. Can you tell me about that one?
The Lower Merion has a railroad history. Most of it deals with what we used to be called the Paoli Local, that goes east to west through the township. At the also the Pennsylvania Railroad had a secondary railroad that went north to south, which was to bring anthracite coal into industrial Philadelphia, and that went from Shamokin, Pennsylvania, into Philadelphia. So it was called the Schuylkill Valley Division. The president of the railroad at the time was our neighbor here, Brooke Roberts, of Lower Merion fame, as president, and he built this railroad and in 1880. And it wasn't until 1890 that he decided to build the Cynwyd train station. So the train station dates back to 1890. The picture I'm looking at now is the upgrade. This was done in 1909. They took the basic station and added a little addition to it as a freight house. This picture is from the roadside, what it looked like looking down on the tracks. This next picture that we have here is the same 1909 picture, but from the track side. What makes train stations kind of interesting is the good side of the station is the track side, not the road side. So this is what passengers going in and out of Philadelphia, the freight going in and out of Philadelphia would see. So this is all the shelter sheds. It's actually called a Cynwyd Depot. It was, besides the commuter station, it was the post office, freight house. If you look underneath the bridge into the back, it is also there's freight yards back there, coal yards, lumber yards, everything, because everything went by rail. It was before, this is 1880, 1890 eras, and before the automobile, so everything moved by rail.
And they were steam engines?
Yes.
Before electrification?
Yes. Electrification comes for quite a long time later. The next pictures kind of give you an overview. This is an aerial view from 1926. And what here's the rail, to the bottom here is from Philadelphia, went up this line up to the Shamokin. The bridge here is the Montgomery Avenue Bridge that still exists, and to the left here is Bala Avenue. So the station is still nestled here, but it gives you the idea of the size of the freight yard or the depot area, the freight yard. And again, the coal came to heat the houses, the lumber came here to build the houses, the straw came here to feed the horses, things like that. So it was the key area for the community. So people lived around the train stations. That was their focus.
Was that freight station about where today's the BMW dealer would be?
Today, where the BMW is, that's why it was, they never had to tear down a building to put up the BMW. It was always an open area freight yard. Okay. In fact, talking to the BMW gentlemen who are putting up the new building, as they dig down levels, they're finding the foundations of some of the older buildings that were there. So we're working with them to identify some of the... just to show you what's going on, this is a picture from 1965 showing the Cynwyd Station, what it looked then. Over time, the station changed management. At first, it was the Pennsylvania Railroad, then it went to Penn Central. It was Conrail for a while, and then SEPTA didn't get it until 1982. But at least this is the picture of the Conrail era of the shelter sheds have been cut back, the depots kind of disappeared because trucks are moving the freight. The post office has moved out, things like that. So it's kind of and it kind of shows it kind of grass not cut, and some of the roofing needs repairs, but it's as I said, there's not as much commuter traffic on this right now.
Did somebody live in the station? Was there an agent?
That I don't know.
Okay.
At this time, I suspect not. In the earlier days, there was a station manager, a family that lived there.
Okay.
They occupied half of the first floor and all the second floor. So there's some notable people, I would say, that would live there. There were blacksmiths, descendants of the Skelton family, things like that. So
That's interesting. Now coming to
this is so you know we knew that when we were given the opportunity to look at the station, that we did some research, and this is a picture of one of the three fires they had. This dates to 1973. There's the station under. You can see what it's kind of run down, but it's still being used. But it's the fires did do some damage to it. And this was a challenge that, as we decided to go in and take a look at the station, we knew there was fire damage that had been hidden or built over. So we were concerned about that.
Jerry, what is the Historical Society's relationship to the station?
The station is still owned by SEPTA. SEPTA did a analysis of the station, brought in their engineers, what would it take to stabilize the building, and they said it was much too extensive. They were not in the restoration business, they were in the commuter rail business, and they said it was too much money to fix it up, and they were just going to let it sit there. The concern from the township was, here's a building in the middle of our community that was abandoned. There was frequent vandalism. It was afraid of imploding. There was a hangout for homeless. A whole list of things I don't want to get into. So they feel it was a place that should be upgraded a bit. The township is not in the business of restoring buildings either. So then it was turned over, asked if the Historical Society would become involved. So actually SEPTA leased it to the township for $1 a year, and then the township subleased it to the Historical Society for $1 a year, contingent on with the knowledge that the Historical Society would revitalize. This is not a historic renovation. We wanted to keep it as an active building. We still had it's a Class 2 building. We had to go before the Historical Commission, so the outside is historically correct. But it's a vernacular building. It was a place that it was used a lot. Isn't like a mainline mansion with the fine woodwork. Everything was very functional, and it was a chance to really take the building apart and understand construction, the mortise and tenon, how things were built. It was for its time. Materials were very good. It was old growth, full cut lumber inside, all the beaming work. Et cetera. So it was a substantial building to take the vibrations of the coal cars going by and the heavy usage. It was as much as 1,000 to 2,000 freight cars going through that station at its prime time.
Wow. I stuck in another picture of the fire just to show how bad the smoke is coming out of the second floor.
Yeah.
This is 73, was it?
Yeah, 1973.
So we were lucky that the building didn't burn to the ground at that time. Okay, coming more towards the future?
When we got the building in 2007, this is what it looked like. I would call it stealth. It looked fairly stable on the outside. So it looked a little run down and worn out, but it was still being used by the community, still a station. But once you walked in the door, you walked in and the first floor had dropped about a foot or so. The basement had a constant foot to a foot and a half of water into it because it's in the holler, so it was full of termites. There was homeless were living in there. There were 3 fires, and it was kind of falling apart at this point. So this was our challenge: was how do we stabilize this building?
Okay. Did the neighborhood club, I was thinking of Mr. Daly, didn't some people get together and paint it at one point?
The neighborhood club back in, I think, in the early 90s, in 91, I believe it was, 1991, the neighborhood club got together and repainted it to make it look better on the outside.
Okay, a little more presentable.
That was on the outside. So this is what it looked like on the tracks, on the estate, on the roadside,
right.
And this is what it looked on the track side.
Okay.
So this is the good side, but you can see the windows are boarded up and et cetera, and it was unsafe just to walk inside the building. It was so bad.
Okay. Speaking about unsafe, can you describe that picture?
Well, the SEPTA engineers took a look at it and said it's going to fall down in a couple of years because the structural beams had been compromised, so it was going to pancake. Then it was the township hired their engineers, Panonis, to verify what the SEPTA said. They said yes, and so that's why something had to be done fairly quickly. So I was out at Gap, Pennsylvania. Around that time, drove by and saw an example of what they were talking about. Once the timbers are compromised, the snow gets on the roof, and literally the weight of the snow will just blow out the building. So this is a Pennsylvania Railroad station in Gap, brick, built around the same time. So this would have been the result of the Cynwyd station about 2 or 3 years. I think about 2 years after we got started, we did have that heavy snow. That was the roof would have been compromised, and we would have lost our 1890 train station. So.
Now, well, we have a couple of minutes before we have to take a break, but let's go inside the station and see what it looked like.
It was, before we started, it was called a design build project. To go in there, we had to really start taking it apart and decide what had to be done, and then start doing the blueprints after the fact. So to see what was done. This is a picture that was taken before construction started, and shows in the basement area, looking up at the timbers and all the termite damage that's there. It was just they were just all over the place. The timbers were falling down, and this whole area was compromised. And also the basement area, which was fieldstone because of the water in there, had parts of the foundation wall had collapsed also.
I remember we've got to take a break here, but I remember you and I walking in there before we knew, and once you see that, whoa, we could have ended up in the basement. This is Ted Goldsboro with Living History. We're talking to Jerry Francis about the renovation of the Cynwyd train station. We'll be right back after a break.